We have one of those innovative dreamers with us today. But she's not just dreaming, she's doing. Lonnie Rae Kurlander is the founder and CEO of Metal, which is an SAP IO-funded company. Lonnie's been featured in Fortune magazine and TechCrunch. She has spoken at conferences all over the world, sharing her inspiration and her inspiring story with thousands of people. Oh yeah, and she's also been recognized as, quote, a badass woman in health tech, unquote. I think you'll agree once you hear from her. Please join me in welcoming on stage the CEO, co-founder of Metal, Miss Lonnie Rae Kurlander. Thank you, Lonnie.
Hello. Hi. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Lonnie Rae, and I am the founder and CEO of Metal. Our mission is to create a globally accessible and useful record of health. And I'm here today to talk to you about purpose and innovation. I know this has been a big theme in SAP, and it's a big part of why and how I joined your family through SAP IO. I've been hit by a bus twice. The second time was figurative, but we'll get to that in a little bit. It's one of those things that causes you to really consider what you're doing with your life. And the first time was when I was on leave of absence from medical school. So I was a third-year medical student. I had 8 months left. I was doing rotations in a satellite hospital, and I kept seeing patients come in without their medical records. So there was one patient in particular who really struck me. He was young. He came in partially paralyzed. He was anxious, as I'm sure you would be too. And then he quickly slipped into being unconscious. And we called the hospitals in the area, but we were not able to gain access to his medical history. So we had, after several days, he was in the ICU, he was on a respirator. We had a hunch of what might have been wrong with him, but a test would have taken 7 days to get back, and he was in critical condition. So luckily, one of our residents decided to run an on-the-fly bedside test, a little less specific, but it did come back positive, and we were able to treat this patient. But I knew in that moment that if we had had access to this patient's history, his care would have been better, it would have been faster, it would have been less expensive, and it would have been a lot easier on him as well. So at that point, I decided that I would move to San Francisco. I petitioned my medical school for leave of absence, put all my stuff in a storage unit back in Boston, and wanted to find out why it was easier for me to pick up my phone and order a car than to find access to life-saving information. So I stayed in San Francisco for a few years, and in that time, I fell in love with San Francisco. I decided that I wanted to be in technology, and I was gonna go back and finish my medical degree, and from there, I would come back to San Francisco and become a chief medical officer or an investor working to take really difficult technology and commercialize it in the real healthcare settings. So I decided that before I went back to medical school and went back to this difficult and grueling curriculum, that I would go on vacation, and that's when I promptly found myself pinned underneath a bus with a broken pelvis. So in that moment, it certainly had the entire life flashes before your eyes moment. But when I came back to San Francisco after this, my record didn't come with me. And despite the fact that I had all of the experience to retrieve these records, which are not easy to get, you have to harangue the hospital, I still wasn't able to do it in that moment. I was medicated, in pain, and as a result, my care ended up costing $10,000 more than it should have. And this was mostly repeat processes and repeat testing. So in the months that followed, while I was stuck in bed, I did what I thought any sane person would do, and I made spreadsheets. So I wanted to understand why my care was more expensive than it should have been. And what I found was that repeat testing was the very smallest cause of waste in healthcare. 1 in 4 Americans have multiple chronic conditions that require ongoing medical attention. And their medical records, on average, are over 200 pages stored in 19 or more locations. Johns Hopkins University estimates that each year 250,000 people die of medical error, which includes medication events, misdiagnoses, and delayed diagnoses. That means that medical error is the third leading cause of death in our country, and for every person that it kills, it harms many more. It costs us close to $1 trillion every year, or 1/3 of our entire national healthcare budget. So that's when I realized that if I spent the rest of my life treating patients and saved the life of every single patient I touched, I'd never help as many people as if I focused everything I had on this problem instead. Does anyone recognize this? Yes, it's the Rosetta Stone. So throughout history, language has paved the way for scientific, philosophical, and technological advancement. But without common language, people cannot communicate. This has the effect of creating moats around people, ideas, and systems. For a while, these moats protect valuable kingdoms, but eventually, as we've seen happen in every story, every industry, the isolation creates weakness, and there are a myriad of breakdowns in everything from innovation to progress to customer care. No one ends up being happy, and so a system arises that allows for the free flow of ideas. So what language breakdown has created this moat in medicine, and why is it suddenly a problem today? Well, medicine has changed. It's gone from a transactional field to a field that manages lifelong wellness. It used to be that we diagnose liver failure, but now we diagnose someone who has the risk of liver failure. We diagnose people with a genetic predisposition to needing a kidney transplant, and we understood how to speak the transactional language of a procedure, but not how to speak the language of preparing for the risk of a serious event. And we need to speak a new language around information and process. Metal is a tool that can help us speak that new language together. We're creating the connection points to help bridge those moats. I'm going to talk to you about where we've been and where we're going, and how technologies like Metal are tools that can help us get there. We're creating a single mechanism that any vendor can use to achieve the same thing and do what they need to do with less pain. By partnering with leading organizations like SAP, we will generate cohesive records for the first time in history. We make the nails, you build the house. Where we've been, well, we've spent $48 billion on medical records that were supposed to exchange data. That was the whole point. But 71% of doctors do not expect that we will be able to do so by 2020. We've been left with fragmented records in a variety of formats, many of which are not able to be exchanged even within their own category. And so when it matters, we end up sharing information on paper, by phone, and by fax. Each year, millions of faxes are sent in healthcare. Some estimates place this estimate as high as 15 billion. I'm going to talk to you about where we're going, but first I'm going to take a moment to talk to you about the zipper. If you've seen a zipper, you've likely seen the letters YKK. Does anyone know why? It stands for Yoshida Manufacturing Company. There was a gentleman named Tadao Yoshida who decided that he would focus on one seemingly simple product and do it better than anyone else had. He founded YKK in 1934, and he coined a term called the cycle of goodness, which was essentially producing a better and better product for less and less money. He preached that no one prospers unless they render a benefit to others, and in a way, this was his form of purpose-driven innovation. They have a reputation unrivaled in the fashion industry because they are completely vertically integrated. They do everything from smelting the metal to packaging the zippers, and a broken zipper renders an entire garment unwearable. So when it matters most, manufacturers rely on YKK. The zipper may look like a seemingly simple invention, but it's actually the result of over 160 years of patent, technology, innovation, and refinement. If you've been working in the trenches in healthcare data lately, you may have heard of FHIR. If you haven't, it's one of the most significant things to happen in healthcare in a very long time. It is the first time we have had a modern programming language that we can use to speak the language of healthcare, similar to the type of language that is used behind the scenes at companies like SAP. But there's still a lot of work to be done to get all of the existing data into this format and to make it usable and to upgrade systems. So what Metal does is we are able to take a variety of formats and put them into a useful database that speaks the language of fire so that people can run applications and programs on top of it. And we make it, like the zipper, we've been based on a long history of innovation. There's been about 17 years of process that's gone into it. My co-founder, Dr. Andy McMurray, created the largest research interchange in our nation to date, which spans about 60 institutions and millions of patients. We do this through a combination of natural language processing, machine learning, deep learning, and expert knowledge and classification of these terms. And we make it very simple to use. It consists of 3 layers. There's data extractions, data storage and processing, and data access and view. We're debuting a new user experience in a couple of weeks, so we're really excited about this. So you know that quote for want of a nail? If every person who had to build a house had to invent the nail, where would we be? And if every person had to invent the zipper to make a backpack? The second time I was hit by a bus was figurative, but it was far worse. I started having sudden neurological deficits and was told that I had an incurable, progressive, and debilitating illness. At the time, I could barely walk. And I was told that if I could make a 10% improvement, that this would be a positive outcome. This was while I was running the company. It was fairly recently. And this was incredibly difficult to hear. So instead of accepting this, I collected over 2,000 pages of my own medical data. I mapped my own genetics. I found specialists all over the world. And I found contributing factors that were contributing to my presentation and other people who have this illness that were actually correctable. I got my life back. And I want others to have access to this type of care. So we do share similar experience, and we're aligned in that it's purpose that drives us. And that's why we're going to be great together. We know that we need effective management strategies, and not those that choose who lives and who dies and who suffers, but those who reframe the problem to how do we manage each individual person at scale effectively. Personalized medicine at scale. We believe that together we can understand each person's medical fingerprint. This fax machine stuff, it's really bad business. But it's also a wonderful opportunity to revolutionize the way that data is exchanged and how we look at that data in the context of a medical picture. I believe there exists a path to a future where no one is haranguing hospitals for copies of medical records, where no one is doing data entry with a medical degree, and where nobody walks to a fax machine in response to a phone call. It may seem far-fetched, but that's where we've been, and our internet experience used to be structured too. That was AOL or America Online. You had this structured page, it told you where to go, and you had limited options. Browsing the internet is what opened up when we developed the ability to search through unstructured data with Google. The ability to read, sort, and map and interpret data opened up the entire online world to us. And this is what Metal does and what we enable for our partners and our customers. The business that was enabled by the switch to the unstructured internet is hard to overstate. And that's what's going to happen in healthcare too. The world has shifted between our feet, and it's about to happen again. SAP.io invested in Metal because, like us, you know that AI is going to change the field of healthcare forever. There are tremendous insights and answers that will be unlocked by gaining access to this data. And like you, we know that the future is in the cloud, and that's why Metal has been cloud first. There's a huge opportunity to partner, not only in technology, but also in the life sciences to develop pathways for treatment, for diagnosis, and a marketplace to give the world a greater understanding of health, to co-create a globally accessible and useful record of health, our gift to the world together. And that's why Metal and SAP have been a match, and why I'm really proud to be part of your family. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Proud to partner with you.
Yeah.